That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream or write a furious letter. I made 3 phone calls, each one quiet, deliberate final. One to my lawyer to change a document that used to be full of hope. One to an old friend who knew how to find truths buried in digital shadows. And one to a storage company to clear space in my home for something I hadn't had in years. Peace. As I packed away decades of birthdays, school photos, and cards that once meant everything, I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. What came next wasn't revenge, but it changed everything. They say silence is golden, but no one ever tells you how heavy it can be. 2 years of silence from my daughter didn't feel peaceful. It felt like punishment. It echoed in the halls of my small house in rural Missouri, bouncing off walls that once held the laughter of children, the occasional teenage tantrum, and the soft music of lullabies. Now the only sounds were the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway, and the soft purring of Churchill, my elderly tabby cat, who had become my only constant companion. He never judged me for crying into a cold cup of tea or for rereading old birthday cards that no longer came. It had been 2 years since Lillian spoke to me. Not a phone call, not even a forwarded chain email. The silence had been complete, the kind that swallows you up and dares you to speak into it just to remind yourself that you're still here. Then, one Tuesday morning, as I was sorting the mail by the front door, I saw it. An envelope thick and shimmering, wrapped with a pale blue ribbon. My breath caught before I even read the embossed lettering. It was an invitation to Lillian's baby shower. Celebrate the upcoming arrival of baby boy Monroe, it read, hosted at a vineyard just outside town. Her name and Isaac's were written in elegant script underneath. No note, no call, just this. I stood at the kitchen counter staring at that piece of paper for what felt like an hour. My fingers traced the ribbon, my heart thudding low in my chest. After everything, after 2 years of being erased from her life, this was how she reached out. I wanted to tear it in half. Part of me even reached for the trash can. But then another part of me, that stubborn sliver of a mother's heart, whispered, maybe this is her way of making peace. Maybe she doesn't know how to say sorry, but she's trying. Hope is a strange thing. It survives when logic dies. It hangs around uninvited and unreasonable, convincing you to try again just one more time. I did what I always did when my emotions got too tangled. I called Julian, my son, my quiet anchor. He was the one who still sent birthday cards and came around for Christmas, even if it was just for an hour, even if Savannah never came with him. He answered after 2 rings. Mom. I tried to sound casual. Did you get an invitation? There was a pause. Yeah, we did. I waited for him to say more, but he didn't. So I asked, do you think I should go? His voice was careful, measured. That's how Julian always talked when he was trying not to take sides, which usually meant he was leaning toward Lillian's. I think, she's different now. Pregnancy has softened her. She talks about you sometimes. That lit something warm in me. I tried to hold it down, not let it show. What does she say? Another pause. She says she misses the way things used to be. I nearly laughed, not out of amusement, but disbelief. The way things used to be. Did that mean when she moved back into my house after her divorce and I took care of her while working 2 jobs? When I watched her kids every weekend while she found herself with a carousel of boyfriends I tried not to question? Or maybe she missed the part where I co-signed her business loan. $40,000. I'm still paying off in retirement because she lost interest and left the whole thing to rot. But I didn't say any of that. I just said I miss her too. After we hung up, I sat in my worn armchair, invitation in hand, Churchill curled at my feet. I thought about all the times I'd shown up for my children without being asked, all the sacrifices made without receipts, and how now, after all this silence, the first olive branch was a formal invitation, a guest list inclusion. Still, I couldn't help myself. I started planning. The next morning I went into town. I hadn't bought a new dress in years, but I found one in a muted navy that hid the extra weight I'd gained during too many evenings alone with ice cream and reruns. I even had my hair done. Just a trim and some soft curls, enough to feel like myself again, the version I liked better. And the gift. Oh, the gift. I spent more than I should have. A cashmere baby blanket in the softest powder blue I'd ever seen. It felt like hope between my fingers, like something you could wrap around a newborn and pretend nothing had ever gone wrong. At home, I took the tag off and wrapped it in silver paper topped with a matching ribbon. Then I practiced my lines in the mirror. Nothing about the past, no mention of the pain or the distance, just smiles. Just, I'm so happy for you and you're going to be a wonderful mother. Because that's what mothers do, isn't it? We show up even when we're unwanted. We bite our tongues and carry our dignity like fine china. That night, I laid the invitation on my nightstand and stared at it in the dark. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to bother me but now felt familiar like a worn sweater. Churchill hopped onto the bed and curled up beside me. I stroked his fur absently and whispered, "Maybe this is it." I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. The next morning, I woke up early and set out my dress, polished my shoes, and checked the ribbon on the gift twice. Before leaving, I picked up the invitation one last time, holding it with both hands like it was something fragile. I looked at the clock. I don't know why I said it out loud. Maybe to myself, maybe to the silence, maybe to the ghost of the mother I used to be. Maybe this is the last chance. And with that, I walked out the door. The vineyard was nestled in the hills just outside of town with winding gravel paths and rows of sun-dappled grapevines stretching toward the horizon. It was beautiful in the way that magazines liked to capture. Rustic but elegant, the kind of place that made people feel like they were part of something refined. I parked farther down the drive than necessary, sitting in the car for a moment before stepping out my gift balanced carefully on the seat beside me. The soft breeze caught the hem of my dress as I walked toward the barn where the event was being held. String lights twinkled above the wide doorway. Laughter spilled out into the air, easy and warm, the kind of laughter I used to hear in my own home long ago. As I stepped inside, no one turned to greet me. No one paused. I stood there for a breath, feeling like I'd arrived late to a party that had already decided I wasn't welcome. I placed the silver-wrapped package on the gift table, careful not to disturb the tower of pastel bags and boxes already stacked there. My blanket, cashmere hand-selected ribbon-matched, looked oddly quiet in that sea of glossy abundance. I straightened it anyway. I saw Julian and Savannah seated with a group that looked like Isaac's family. He didn't see me, or maybe he did and looked away. Either way, I didn't wave. Then I spotted her. Lillian. She was across the room, radiant in a flowing white maternity dress, hand resting lightly on her rounded belly, surrounded by friends who leaned in, touched her arm, laughed like she was the center of the sun. And she was. She'd always known how to be. That charm had followed her from childhood through adolescence, turning strangers into allies and sidestepping accountability with a smile. She noticed me at last. Our eyes met for just a second. Her smile faltered but reappeared quickly, tight and practiced. She walked over slowly, her steps graceful, measured. "You came," she said, voice polite but distant. No hug, just the words. "Of course," I replied. "I wouldn't miss it." "You look beautiful." "Thanks," she said, eyes already scanning the room behind me. "There's food and drinks over there. I should get back to greeting people." She turned before I could respond, her dress trailing behind her as she vanished into the circle of guests again. I stood there for a beat, then quietly made my way to a small table in the back. Alone. I sipped water from a plastic flute and made small talk with a woman I didn't know. Someone from Isaac's extended family who smiled politely but clearly had no idea who I was. It was better that way, I think. I didn't have to explain why I was sitting by myself or why my smile never quite reached my eyes. Lillian continued to glide through the barn like the guest of honor she was. She opened gifts with practiced enthusiasm, cooed over booties and onesies, giggled over diaper cakes and hand-sewn quilts. When my gift was passed to her, she didn't pause. She set it aside unopened and reached for the next. My heart twitched. I pressed my palm to my chest, took a deep breath, and looked away. Then someone clinked a glass. It was Isaac, standing beside Lillian Arm, gently on her back. "Thank you all for being here today," he began. "It means the world to us, to be surrounded by such love as we prepare to welcome our son." There was warm applause. Then Savannah stood and, to my surprise, began to read a poem about motherhood. It was beautiful, poignant. Several women dabbed at their eyes. She never once looked at me. Lillian stepped forward next, holding a glass of sparkling water. She looked around the room, voice steady and clear. "I just want to say thank you to everyone here today," she began. "Starting a family is beautiful but terrifying, and having you all by our side means everything to us." She turned slightly, her gaze landing on an elegantly dressed woman in her 60s. Silver hair, designer blouse, soft pearls. Evelyn Monroe, her mother-in-law. "But there's someone I want to especially thank," Lillian said, her voice growing softer, more emotional. "Someone who has been a constant light in my life these past few years, who's shown me what real motherhood looks like. Patient, steady, full of love and grace." My heart began to pound. I sat up straighter, my fingers tightening around the stem of my glass. Was this it? After everything, Lillian raised her glass higher. "This is for you, Evelyn. You're the mother I wish had raised me. And I know in my heart that you will be the one and only true grandmother to our child." The room erupted in applause. I didn't hear it. Not really. I only saw Evelyn stand, eyes glistening, as Lillian stepped forward to embrace her. I saw Isaac beaming his hand on Lillian's back. I saw Julian clapping, looking deliberately away from me. And I sat there invisible in a room full of people. A mother, erased. I rose quietly. No one noticed. I walked out of the barn, my heels crunching the gravel path. The sun was starting to lower, casting long shadows across the vineyards. I reached my car, slid into the driver's seat, and closed the door with a soft click. I didn't cry. Not one tear. Instead, I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My lipstick still held. My earrings still sparkled. I looked exactly like a woman who had expected to feel out of place, and had been proven right. I gripped the steering wheel with both hands. My voice was steady, low. "That's enough. No anger. No rage. Just a quiet verdict spoken into the silence. And for the first time in a long time, I felt sure of something. Unshakably sure. This wasn't just a final insult, it was clarity. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with the weight of that afternoon pressing against my chest like a brick. The sentence played over and over in my head. "You're the mother I wish had raised me." I tried to dismiss it, to remind myself that words spoken at parties often came dressed in showmanship. But it wasn't just the sentence. It was the applause, the embrace, the way Lillian had smiled with such pure ease in Evelyn's arms. It was the certainty behind her words, the erasure of everything I had done to raise her, carry her, love her. Churchill curled beside me, his rhythmic breathing soft and steady. At some point in the night, I rose, wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, and stood at the kitchen sink, sipping cold water, staring into the darkness outside. And it was there, in that quiet stillness, that something shifted inside me. Not anger, not revenge, just resolve. A calm, clean break from a lifetime of waiting to be treated with decency. The first call I made was to my attorney. It was just after 8 a.m. when I dialed his number. Charles had been my lawyer for decades. He helped me navigate the divorce, the refinancing of the house, and had drafted my first will. He picked up after 2 rings. "Natalie," he said warmly, "it's been a while." "It has," I replied. "I need to update my estate plans." There was a pause, then a soft exhale. "Of course. You want to schedule a meeting?" "No," I said. "I already know what I want. I just need it executed quickly." Charles listened without interrupting as I explained the full removal of both Lillian and Julian as beneficiaries, the redirection of my life insurance and property. Half to the local animal shelter where I volunteered on Saturdays, a quarter to a scholarship fund for single mothers attending the community college, and the remaining quarter to be placed in a trust for my grandchild, should he ever seek me out after turning 18. And make it ironclad, I added. Irrevocable. Charles was silent for a beat before saying, Understood. I'll draft the documents today. The second call I made was to Frank Delaney. Frank was an old friend. Briefly a romantic interest after my divorce, though that fizzled into something more enduring. He was a private investigator by trade, semi-retired now, but still sharp as ever. We hadn't spoken in a while, but he answered on the first ring. Well, he said, his voice warm. Didn't expect to hear from you, Natalie. I need your help, I said simply. Off the record. He didn't ask why. Frank never needed the full story to understand a situation. What are we talking about? I want access to any digital records my children have shared about me. Emails, texts. I suspect there's been discussion. I want it confirmed. Discreetly, he asked. Always. Give me a few days, he said, and send me whatever you can. Phone numbers, emails, anything that helps. I thanked him and hung up. I didn't feel proud of the request. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who needed to spy on her children, but I also didn't want to be the kind of mother who walked blindly into humiliation again. The third call was to a storage facility on the other side of town. I'd like to rent a climate-controlled unit, I told the young woman on the line, and I'll need 24-hour access. She took down my details, gave me the unit number, and told me the gate code. Just like that, I had a place to store the life I no longer wanted to display. By noon, I was standing in the middle of my living room, surrounded by 30 years of carefully curated sentiment. There were photo albums yellowed with time, filled with birthday parties, ballet recitals, school plays, report cards with stickers still attached, Mother's Day cards with smudged crayon hearts, and stick figures holding hands. I had kept every note, every drawing, every reminder that once I had been loved, or at least needed. I didn't cry as I sorted through it all. I moved deliberately like someone packing up a house for a move they weren't sad to make. I labeled the boxes with dates, names, little details to remind myself what each one held, not for nostalgia, but for record-keeping, for closure. There was a box of baby clothes I'd saved from Lillian's early years. Tiny shoes with scuffed soles, a pink bonnet from the hospital. Her first onesie that still carried the faintest trace of baby powder. I held it to my nose out of habit, not longing. It smelled like dust now. Julian's trophies went into a separate box. Baseball, science fair, spelling bees. I'd sat through all those competitions cheering louder than anyone. He used to look for me in the stands. Somewhere along the way he stopped. I found the letter Julian wrote me when he got into college. Couldn't have done it without you, Mom. A short note scribbled on notebook paper, but I had folded it into quarters and stored it like treasure. I placed it at the bottom of a box marked College Years. I didn't throw anything away. Not yet. I didn't know if I ever would. But I didn't want them in my home anymore. I didn't want reminders on the shelves or hanging on the walls. They didn't bring comfort now. They brought silence questions, the ache of hope deferred. By early evening, I had packed 8 boxes. Churchill watched from the couch tail, flicking occasionally as I moved from room to room. I'd emptied the hallway table, the bottom drawers of my bedroom dresser, the linen closet where I used to stash holiday decorations and school art projects. When I looked around, the house felt different. Not empty, lighter. I loaded the boxes into my car 2 at a time. It took several trips. I drove them across town and stacked them neatly in the new unit, locking the door behind me with a satisfying click. Back home, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat in the quiet. No one knew what I had done. No one saw me make the calls, lift the boxes, update the will, or erase the evidence of my motherhood from the house where it had once flourished. There were no dramatic speeches, no slammed doors, just action, intentional, silent action. I wasn't looking for permission. I wasn't waiting for someone to realize I'd had enough. I had realized it myself. That night, I slept through the entire night for the first time in weeks. And when I woke in the morning, I didn't feel hollow. I felt ready. Exactly 1 week after the baby shower, a small square box arrived at Lillian's doorstep. It was wrapped in simple brown paper sealed tightly and required a signature upon delivery. The timing was intentional, 9 a.m., just early enough to disrupt their morning, but not so early that it could be dismissed as an inconvenience. Inside was a leather-bound binder. No note, no card, just a title embossed in gold on the cover. Financial Records, Lillian Monroe, 2015-2023. The contents were neatly organized bank statements, credit card transactions, Venmo screenshots, wire transfers, a full accounting of 8 years' worth of financial support, every bill I'd paid, every loan I'd forgiven, every deposit I'd made on her behalf. The total was clearly noted at the end, $157, $422.19. That afternoon, I was in the garden pruning the rose bushes by the fence. The spring sun was mild and Churchill lounged on a patch of grass nearby, lazily swatting at butterflies. My phone rang and I didn't even have to check the caller ID. Lillian's voice came sharp and tight. "What the hell is this?" "Hello, Lillian," I said, brushing soil from my gloves. "I assume you received my package." "You call this a package? It's a bunch of old receipts." "Bank statements." "What are you trying to prove? That you paid my light bill in 2017? That you co-signed for my lease? I'm not trying to prove anything," I said calmly. "I'm simply organizing my affairs. You're sending me spreadsheets as if I'm some delinquent tenant," she snapped. "Are you expecting me to pay you back now?" "No," I replied. "It's a gift, a record of generosity. Something for your son to look back on one day. A piece of family history, you might say." She went silent for a moment, the pause thick with disbelief. "Is this about what I said at the shower? About Evelyn?" I stood and clipped a faded bloom from the rosebush. "You mean the part where you publicly declared another woman, the mother you wish had raised you?" "Yes, Lillian." "That part." "That wasn't what I meant," she said quickly. "I was emotional. Pregnant women say things. People say things." I echoed, and sometimes those things are exactly what they mean. "You're unbelievable," she spat. "This is just petty. It's revenge. You're trying to make me feel guilty." "I'm not interested in guilt," I said. "I'm interested in truth." "And clarity." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "Well, mission accomplished. You've made your point. Loud and clear." "Good," I said. "Then we won't need to have this conversation again." She hung up without another word. I stood there for a long moment, the garden quiet again, except for the distant hum of a lawnmower down the block. So I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel anything close to joy. I felt centered. I felt precise. The next day, Julian received his own box. It was similar in shape and weight, but inside were not only financial records, though there were plenty, but also printed screenshots of conversations, text threads between him and Savannah, emails from his work account forwarded and saved, discussions about how to handle Mom, notes about keeping the kids away from me because I was too emotionally draining, jokes about my outdated views, my clothes, my presents. Each message collected time-stamped, printed in black and white. He called that evening. "Mom." His voice was low, cautious. Always the diplomat. "Julian." I said, "Did you receive something interesting in the mail?" A long pause. "This isn't like you." "No," I asked. "What am I like then? You're forgiving, understanding. You don't hold grudges." "I've been many things," I said gently, "but I'm not sure those traits served me well." "Look, if this is about what Lillian said." "It's not just about Lillian," I interrupted. "It's about years of being spoken about behind my back, of being avoided, minimized, excluded. It's about you calling me needy while still asking for help, about pretending I don't notice when the invitations stop coming or when Savannah can't look me in the eye." He sighed, the sound brittle and defensive. "People say things they don't mean when they're frustrated." Perhaps I said, "But when those things are said repeatedly to different people over many years, that's not frustration. That's character." He was silent again. "So what do you want?" he asked finally. "An apology." "Fine. I'm sorry. We're sorry. Just stop whatever this is." I was stirring a pot of soup on the stove, the scent of thyme rising in the air. "It's far too late for apologies, Julian. And this isn't something that can be stopped." "Then what is it?" It's consequence. I said simply, "This is what happens when people mistake kindness for weakness, when they rely on someone's love as a bottomless resource." "You're threatening us." "No, I said tasting the broth. I'm informing you. The dynamic has shifted. For decades it was about what you and Lillian needed. Now it's about what I deserve." He scoffed quietly. "What does that mean?" "It means there will be 2 more deliveries," I said. "One tomorrow, one the day after, then we'll be done." "You're serious." "Good night, Julian." I hung up before he could reply. Churchill jumped up onto the counter, eyeing the soup with interest. I scratched behind his ears and smiled at the deep purring that followed. "No soup for you," I murmured. "But I think we still have some salmon left." That night I didn't check my phone. I didn't replay the conversations in my head. I simply read a book on the porch until the sun dipped below the trees and the wind turned cool. What I had done wasn't revenge. It was something far deeper than that. It was reclamation. It was remembering who I was before motherhood became a role I performed instead of a life I lived. It was the sound of my own voice finally clear and free from apology, and it was just the beginning. The next morning, 2 identical manila envelopes were delivered, one to Julian, one to Lillian. I knew when they arrived. I had paid extra to ensure they would be signed for before noon, a little disruption during their otherwise ordinary morning routines. Inside each envelope was a freshly signed copy of my updated will. Clean legal language notarized, dated precisely 1 day after the baby shower. Everything laid out plainly. My house, my savings, my life insurance, all accounted for. 50% to the local animal shelter where I spent weekends cleaning cages and helping families find their companions. That place had given me more unconditional love in recent years than most people had. 25% to a scholarship fund for single mothers, because I knew the lonely, sleepless road they walked. And the final 25% to a trust, locked until Elijah turned 18, and if he so chose, reached out to find me. If he did, he would be met with open arms and the knowledge that I had never once blamed him for the choices of his parents. For Julian and Lillian, there was nothing. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I believed people should not be rewarded for treating others like footnotes, and I was finished being the fine print in my own story. Also enclosed in each envelope was legal documentation showing that the will had been secured in an irrevocable trust. It could not be contested, not successfully, not anymore. Lillian called first. Of course she did. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was tight and trembling. "I can't believe you would do this. Family is family. You don't cut people out over one moment. This is selfish. Unforgivable." Julian didn't call. He texted instead. Just 3 words. "We need to talk." I didn't reply. That night I sat by the window, the house dark around me, watching the wind ruffle the trees outside. I felt no guilt, no second guessing, only stillness, and with it a deep, long overdue peace. But the next delivery, that one required something different. It came in larger boxes, the kind you had to sign for with both hands. I had spent days preparing them, carefully, methodically. Each was filled with photo albums, school projects, baby books. All the physical reminders of a life spent loving, raising, sacrificing. But these were not quite the originals. I had edited each piece, where a crayon drawing once said, "To Mom," it now read, "To Evelyn," where Lillian had written, "Love you, Mommy," on her 5th birthday card. I had digitally replaced the name with Evelyn. In photos, I had painstakingly removed my face, sometimes cropping, sometimes replacing with stock images of smiling older women who resembled Evelyn. In others, I inserted Evelyn herself. It had taken effort, patience, and a surprising amount of digital skill. Julian's childhood awards certificates, family portraits, also revised. Proud parent, Evelyn Monroe. A clean, sharp lie to match the clean, sharp truth they had chosen to live with. After all, hadn't Lillian said Evelyn was the mother she wished had raised her? Hadn't she declared that Evelyn was the true grandmother to her child? Who was I to argue? These boxes weren't meant to punish. They were mirrors. Reflections of the choices my children had made delivered back to them with silence. The boxes were signed for in the morning. Lillian arrived at my door 3 hours later. She was carrying the box like it might explode her face, blotchy with tears. Julian's car pulled in behind her, and for a second, seeing the two of them together on my porch, I felt something stir. Not regret, not hope. Something else, something old and tired that had once been love and now was simply recognition. We had history. But that didn't mean we still had a future. Lillian's voice cracked before she'd even stepped over the threshold. How could you do this? These are our memories. I looked at her evenly. Are they? I thought you'd prefer Evelyn in them. Julian hovered just behind her hands in his pockets, his face tight with something that resembled embarrassment. I stepped aside to let them in. There was no point having the neighbors hear this. Inside the living room was clean, stripped of all sentimental traces. No framed photos on the mantel, no keepsakes on the shelves. I had removed everything in preparation for this moment. Lillian placed the box on my coffee table and opened it hastily. Altered photographs spilled out. Her birthday parties, her first dance recital, her high school graduation. All with a mother that wasn't me. This is sick, she stammered. Manipulative. Is it? I asked softly. You stood in front of a room full of people and said another woman was the mother you wished you'd had. I'm simply honoring that. Julian stepped between us, ever the mediator. Mom, what Lillian said was wrong, we both know that. But this, he gestured at the photos. This isn't the way. And what is the way, Julian, I asked. Should I have cried in the back of the room, made a scene, sent a dramatic letter begging for respect? Tell me, since you seem to know the right way for a mother to feel when her children decide she's no longer convenient. He had no answer. Lillian sat down heavily, thumbing through the pages of the album. How did you even do this? She asked, voice shaky. There are hundreds of these. I had time, I replied. And motivation. But why, she whispered. To hurt us, I tilted my head, considering, no, not to hurt you. Not even to make you feel guilty. This isn't about emotion anymore. It's about accuracy. You made your choices. I'm simply helping you see them more clearly. Julian ran a hand through his hair, an old habit that reminded me of his father. What's the end game here, Mom? You changed your will. You erased yourself from our memories. You've made your point. What do you want from us? I looked at both of them. Nothing. That's the point. I want nothing from either of you. For years, I wanted your time, your respect, your acknowledgement. Now I want peace. They exchanged glances. They didn't believe me. Not really. I stood. I'm done performing the role of the ever-giving mother. I'm done being the easy target for your disappointment. I've taught you everything I can. Lillian's hand moved to her belly instinctively. So that's it, you're just canceling us. Walking away from your grandchild. I looked at her with a level gaze. You canceled me first. I'm simply adjusting my expectations. Julian's face was pale. This isn't you. You're right, I said. The woman you remember, the one who gave endlessly without asking anything in return. That woman is gone. Maybe she never really existed. They stood there, caught between protest and guilt. I opened the front door. You should go now. Neither of them moved. You'll regret this, Lillian said, her voice hard. When my son is born and you're not part of his life, you'll regret this bitterness. I looked at her, my daughter, my betrayer, my mirror, and said very softly, I've had many regrets in my life. Loving you too much to set boundaries, excusing things I'd never tolerate from anyone else. But this right here, I will never regret. They left. Finally, Julian guiding Lillian by the elbow. I watched from the window as they argued in the driveway, gesturing toward the house. Then they climbed into separate cars and drove away. Churchill jumped onto the windowsill, watching them vanish down the road. "It's just us now," I whispered, stroking his fur, and for once that felt like more than enough. I wasn't surprised when they came back. 3 days after the altered photo albums were delivered, I heard a knock at the door. Sharper than usual, insistent, but not aggressive. I'd been expecting it. Some things don't require foresight. They just make sense. Hurt pride is predictable. When I opened the door, Lillian stood there clutching the box of memories, her cheeks flushed and damp. Her hair was pulled back hastily, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy, and she looked like she hadn't slept. Behind her, Julian stood with his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets, eyes set somewhere near the floorboards, his jaw tight with restraint. Lillian didn't wait for an invitation. "How could you do this?" she asked, her voice breaking, holding the box in both arms like she needed it to keep her upright. "These are our memories." I looked at her calmly. "Are they? Because I thought you made it pretty clear who your real mother is now?" Julian stepped up beside her. "Come on, Mom. You didn't have to go this far." I moved aside just enough for them to enter. I didn't want to air this out on the front porch, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't owe the neighbors any explanation. I didn't owe anyone anything anymore. The living room was tidy, minimal. I'd kept it that way intentionally. No family pictures, no children's artwork, no mementos to prompt softening. I'd removed the weight of sentimentality so I wouldn't be tempted to second-guess my decision. Lillian placed the box on the coffee table with a loud thud, as if hoping the sound alone would shake me. "You altered everything," she said, pulling out a photo and holding it up. "My 5th birthday party. You're not even in this one." "It's Evelyn." I nodded. "Yes, that's what you said you wanted. I simply helped you visualize it." She stared at me open-mouthed. It was just something I said. I was overwhelmed. "That wasn't what you meant," I asked, because it sounded pretty clear to everyone in that room, including me. Julian stepped in, then trying to play the peacemaker again. "Look, I know things got out of hand, but this feels cruel." I met his gaze. Cruel is raising 2 children alone, giving everything you have, only to be erased in public. Cruel is watching your daughter praise a woman she barely knows for a role you gave your whole life to. Cruel is listening to your son talk behind your back, calling you difficult and overbearing while still cashing your checks. His lips tightened. "You went through our messages." "I did," I said, "and I'm not sorry." Lillian sat down on the couch, her hands trembling as she flipped through the altered album. "How long did this take you?" "Long enough," I said. But it wasn't about time. It was about clarity. About showing you what it feels like to be replaced. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It's not the same." "No," I said. "It's not. Because you chose to replace me." I only returned the gesture. Julian stepped forward, his tone rising. "This is manipulation, Mom. You're punishing us because we didn't handle things the way you wanted." I let out a breath. Not out of frustration, but finality. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said softly. "I'm just stepping away from the performance, from the expectations. I've played the selfless mother long enough. I've smiled through insult after insult. And I'm tired." Lillian looked up at me, her expression raw. "So that's it. You're just done." "Yes," I answered. "I'm done begging to be seen. I'm done being useful only when you need something. I'm done watching you both rewrite history while expecting me to stay silent in the wings." Her voice cracked again. "But what about Elijah? He's your grandson." I walked over to the window, looking out at the stillness of the backyard. The garden had been trimmed recently. New bulbs planted. Life moving forward even when people didn't. "Elijah is innocent," I said, "which is why I've left something for him should he want it someday." But I won't let my love for him be another avenue for you to come and go from my life as you please." Julian's voice was quieter now, but still edged with disbelief. "You don't even want to try to fix this." I turned to face them both. "I don't want to keep patching over a foundation that was never respected. You made your choices. I just finally made mine." Lillian stood again, suddenly angry. "You raised us better than this." "No," I said. "I raised you as best I could. I gave more than I had to give. But raising children doesn't mean they'll love you well. It doesn't guarantee they'll see you as a person." She reached for the box again, her hands unsteady. "You don't get to erase yourself from our lives and call it healing." "I didn't erase myself," I replied. "You did. I just helped you see what that looks like." Julian sighed and looked around the room as if searching for some part of the old home that still felt familiar. But I had cleared those pieces out too. "This isn't the mother we knew," he said. "You're right," I told him. "Because the mother you knew didn't have boundaries. She gave without limit. She swallowed hurt and called it love. She waited for holidays that never came and calls that never rang. That woman is gone." There was a long silence. Lillian finally whispered, "So what now?" I walked to the front door and opened it wide. "Now you go." Neither of them moved right away. "I'm not angry," I added. "I'm just finished. I'm not interested in drama or dragging out this pain any longer. I don't want to fight. I've chosen silence." Lillian blinked quickly, tears threatening again. "You'll regret this, Mom." I shook my head gently. I already did, for years. Every time I allowed disrespect, every time I justified your neglect, I regretted it. But not anymore. I'm clear now, and that clarity has given me peace I didn't know was possible. They left slowly, the weight of unspoken things trailing behind them like shadows. I closed the door softly after they stepped outside. No slamming, no shouting, just the quiet click of closure. Churchill padded into the room and looked up at me expectantly. I crouched to scratch his head. "No more battles," I whispered. "Only stillness now, and for the first time in my life that felt like a victory." It was a Wednesday afternoon when I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a brief second I considered not answering. I'd grown comfortable with silence, with the stillness that had settled around my home like a soft, protective blanket. But curiosity nudged me. When I opened the door, there he was. Isaac Monroe, my son-in-law. He looked uncomfortable standing on my porch in a suit that seemed a bit too tight around the middle. He shifted his weight hands, fiddling with his car keys. We'd never been close, Isaac and I. There had always been a polite distance between us, the kind that forms when both parties try, but never quite meet in the middle. "Mrs. Hayes," he said formally, his voice low. "I know this is unexpected." I nodded but didn't move. "Isaac..." He glanced back toward his car as if debating whether to retreat. Then he sighed. "Could I come in for a moment? This would be awkward enough on a doorstep." I stepped aside wordlessly. He entered like someone walking into a room full of breakables, unsure where to stand, what to touch. I didn't offer him tea or coffee. That ritual felt too intimate, too generous. He remained standing in the living room, looking around at the stripped-down space. The walls were bare of family photos. No baby pictures, no childhood artwork, no holiday cards. Just neutral calm. "She doesn't know I'm here," he said finally. I said nothing. I didn't need to ask who she was. If Lillian knew I was coming, she'd probably have my head, he added with a tight smile that faded quickly. "Then why are you here?" I asked. He let out another breath and ran a hand through his hair. "Because she's not doing well. Not sleeping. She cries constantly. Her blood pressure's up. The stress isn't good for the baby. Or for us." I waited. My arms crossed loosely over my chest. I'd grown good at letting others speak without rushing in to fill the silence. Let them sit with their words. "She's miserable," he continued. "She knows she messed up. She regrets the things she said, what she did. I raised an eyebrow. Does she regret them enough to say it to me? Publicly, the way she humiliated me? Isaac flinched. She's afraid. I tilted my head slightly. Afraid of what? Owning her words, he hesitated. Afraid you won't forgive her. She didn't seem concerned about forgiveness when she made her speech. I know, he said. I told her it was wrong. Even that day I told her. But she was trying to impress my family. You know how it is. They have expectations. Expectations, I repeated. So your wife threw her mother under the bus to win the approval of people who think designer clothes matter more than character. Isaac shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't meant to come out that way. But it did. He nodded slowly. Yes, it did. There was a long pause between us. The only sound was the quiet tick of the clock on the wall. Why are you really here, Isaac? He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. Because I want to ask, no beg, that you come to the hospital when the baby is born. Let Lillian apologize in person. Be there when your grandson comes into the world. Start fresh. I didn't answer right away. I looked past him out the window at the garden I'd spent the past week tending. The daffodils were starting to bloom. She wants forgiveness, I said finally. But only if I show up first. Only if I bridge the distance she created. Is that really an apology, or is it just damage control? I don't know, he admitted. I think it's both. Does she want to apologize because she's truly remorseful, or because she's afraid of facing motherhood without a safety net? I can't answer that either. He said, all I can tell you is, she's breaking, and I don't know how to help her. I walked to the window, resting my hand on the frame. My voice was quiet. I'm not angry anymore, Isaac. I want you to understand that anger is heavy, and I've laid it down. But I've also laid down something else. Obligation. I spent decades showing up, being available, being used and dismissed. I don't owe anyone my presence anymore. She's your daughter, he said gently. And I loved her beyond measure, I replied. But love without respect is servitude. I've already served my time. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my tone stopped him. What about the baby, he asked. He's innocent. I nodded. He is. Which is why I've set aside something for him. A trust. He'll have access to it when he's old enough to seek me out. On his own terms. Isaac's eyes widened slightly. You've already made plans. I've had years to think about this, I said. Years of holidays spent alone. Of calls not returned. Of favors asked and thanks forgotten. This moment. It didn't happen overnight. He looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. I just thought, maybe there was still a chance. I know you did, I said. And I appreciate your effort. It takes courage to come here. But this isn't about one moment. It's about patterns. About how a person is consistently treated when no one's watching. He nodded slowly. You're not coming then? No, I said softly. I'm not. We stood there for a while, not speaking. Finally, he turned toward the door. For what it's worth, he said, hand on the doorknob. I've always respected you. I told Lillian that. I just wish things had been different. Me too, I said, but wishing doesn't make it so. He left quietly. No drama, no demands, just the quiet footsteps of a man who understood that he'd reached the end of the road. After the door closed, I sat in the armchair by the window, Churchill curling at my feet. I watched the late afternoon sun filter through the curtains. I felt no guilt, no regret, only calm. The kind that comes when you finally accept the truth. That peace often arrives the moment you stop asking for an apology that will never come. It was late afternoon when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I was out in the garden, kneeling in the soft earth, planting new rose bushes along the path. The sky was overcast, the air thick with that particular stillness that comes before rain. Churchill was perched nearby, tail flicking lazily as he watched me dig. I didn't look up until I heard the door of the car close. When I did, I saw Julian walking toward me, hands in his coat pockets, moving slowly. He looked older than his 42 years. There was a slump in his shoulders I hadn't seen before. "Mom," he said gently as he approached. "I should have called. I didn't stand." I pressed down on the soil around the new plant and smoothed it with my trowel. "What brings you here?" I asked, brushing the dirt from my gloves without looking at him. He hesitated, then gestured vaguely toward the house and garden. "New place looks nice. It suits you." I finally rose, wiping my hands on a towel I'd tucked into my waistband. "Thank you." "What are you here for, Julian?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You heard about Evelyn?" I nodded. "Yes. Robert mentioned it. Stroke, wasn't it?" "Yeah, massive one. She collapsed at a charity function. Gone before the ambulance even arrived. I said nothing. I had no feelings about Evelyn's death. Not joy, not sadness. She had become a symbol more than a person in my story. A stand-in. A replacement I never asked for. Cassie's a mess," he continued. "She's not taking it well. Neither is Isaac." I glanced up at him. "Is that why you're here? To tell me that my daughter is grieving the woman she called her true mother?" He didn't flinch. He expected that line. "I know it's complicated." "No," I said. "It's very simple. Cassie made her choice. Now she's lost that choice. I'm sorry for her pain, but I'm not her backup plan." He looked down at the freshly turned soil. "She's lost, Mom. Really lost." I nodded slowly. "And where was she when I was lost?" "Julian. When your father left, when I had to figure out how to raise 2 kids on my own. Was anyone worried about whether I slept, whether I cried into a dish towel while folding laundry at midnight?" He didn't answer. "When I had surgery 3 years ago, did either of you offer to stay with me during recovery?" "No." "When your aunt died and I asked you to come to the funeral, did you show up?" "No." "You both sent flowers?" "From a distance." He shifted uncomfortably, hands now clenched in his pockets. "That was different," he muttered. "We were busy," I said, cutting him off. "Too busy to show up when it wasn't convenient. And now you want me to show up for the woman who replaced me just to soothe the one who erased me?" He looked up, meeting my eyes. "It's not like that. It is exactly like that. She regrets what she did. Does she?" I asked. "Or does she regret that she no longer has someone to take her baby while she showers? Someone to pick up the pieces that Evelyn can't anymore? Is it regret or desperation?" Julian was silent for a long time. "I'm not trying to defend what she said," he finally offered. "It was wrong. We were both wrong." I stepped toward the porch, motioning for him to follow. We sat on the wooden steps side by side the way we used to when he was young and couldn't sleep during thunderstorms. "She's scared," he said softly. "Not just about the baby. About being alone. About having burned the last bridge." I looked out across the yard, the breeze rustling through the tall grass. "Then maybe she'll learn something from that. Maybe it's time she realized that some bridges don't get rebuilt." Julian glanced at me. "So you won't come? Not even to the funeral?" I turned to him slowly. "Tell me something, Julian. When your father walked out and I sat at the kitchen table for hours wondering how I'd keep the house, keep the lights on, did anyone come to my door with comfort? When I lost people I loved, did anyone say, 'She's alone, we should go sit with her'? No. Because my grief was inconvenient, unspoken, expected to be endured quietly." He exhaled. "You're right. I know you're right. I just want it to be over." I finished for him. "You want peace." He nodded. "For her. For all of us." "There is peace, Julian," I said. "But it comes from acceptance, not pretending. I've accepted who my daughter has become, and who I've become in her eyes." He dropped his gaze to the porch floor. "She needs her mother," he said after a pause. She had her mother, I replied. She just didn't recognize her. And now in the wake of her favorite's death, she wants me to fill the void she created. He opened his mouth but couldn't seem to find the words. I stood, brushing my hands down my thighs. This isn't bitterness. I'm not angry. I'm not waiting to be begged. I've simply moved on. Julian rose too. So that's it. That's it. He hesitated on the porch, glancing back toward his car. She'll be heartbroken. I already was, I said gently. For years. He looked at me again, and this time I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Not judgment. Not even sadness. Just understanding. Maybe finally he was starting to see it from where I stood. I wish things were different, he said. So did I replied, until I stopped wishing. He took a few steps back toward his car, then paused. The service is at 2, First Presbyterian, just in case. I didn't respond. I watched as he climbed into his car, backed out of the driveway, and drove away. That night I poured myself a glass of wine and booked a ticket to a botanical garden 2 hours away. I'd been meaning to go for months, but had always put it off for someone else's needs. The next day, while Evelyn Monroe was being laid to rest in a polished oak casket, I walked among wildflowers and glass conservatories. I took photos. I breathed deeply. I felt no guilt, no second thoughts, just freedom, just peace. 3 weeks passed after Evelyn's funeral. The days were quiet but never lonely. For the first time in my life, the silence didn't sting. It soothed. I spent my mornings volunteering at the literacy center downtown, helping adults who had fallen through the cracks of the system learn to read and write with confidence. There was something healing about that, about watching grown men and women light up when they could finally fill out a form without shame or read a children's book to their own kids. In the afternoons, I wandered the trails behind the botanical gardens. Sometimes I took a notebook. Other times I just walked, letting the air and sun press against my skin, without needing to be anywhere or anyone for anybody else. I visited the small art museum in town on Thursdays, started giving tours to school groups and seniors. I found joy in little things. A strong cup of tea, the smell of garden soil, the squeak of new shoes on polished floors. My evenings belonged to Churchill and old books. I'd finally begun reading the stack I had promised myself I'd get to someday. That day had arrived. Life slowed in the best way. I no longer checked my phone out of habit. I no longer wondered if there was a message from them, because I had stopped hoping for what I already knew wouldn't come. One sunny afternoon in early spring, I opened my mailbox and found a cream-colored envelope. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Lillian's. Inside was a birth announcement, a simple card. Baby boy swaddled in pale blue, red-faced and squinting at the camera. His name written in a serif font, Elijah Monroe. 7 pounds 4 ounces, 21 inches long. I ran my thumb over the picture once gently, then flipped the card over. On the back in her handwriting were 8 words. Your grandson. If you want to meet him, call me. No apology. No acknowledgement of the past. Just an invitation. A trapdoor cracked open barely enough to crawl through, yet wide enough to question. I held the card for a long while at the kitchen table, the late afternoon light spilling across it like something holy. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply sat with it. Then, without ceremony, I placed it on the mantel beside a photo of me and Churchill at the garden fundraiser last fall. A new memory, beside an unopened invitation to an old role I had finally stepped out of. I didn't call. I didn't need to. Because something had shifted inside me. For the first time since I'd become a mother, I was no longer performing. I wasn't keeping score, or making peace offerings, or bracing for disappointment. I wasn't being defined by someone else's expectations of what a mother should do or say or sacrifice. I was just being. The days continued in their soft rhythm. I planted tulips along the side of the house, their green shoots slowly breaking through the thawed ground. I joined a weekend hiking group of women my age, most of them divorced or widowed, all of them rediscovering what it meant to make choices without consulting anyone else. We laughed more than I expected. Some days I even forgot to think about the past. Spring turned into early summer. My garden bloomed with color. Lavender and roses and poppies waved in the breeze. Churchill had found a favorite sunny spot in the corner of the porch where he napped most afternoons. I learned to make marmalade from scratch. I finally painted the guest room the soft sage green I'd always wanted. Each small act felt like a reclamation. Each quiet choice, a return to myself. Sometimes I thought about Elijah. Not with ache, not with urgency. Just a soft wondering. I hoped he was healthy, safe, loved. I hoped that one day when he was old enough he'd find his way to the truth. That there had been someone who loved him before he was ever born. Someone who set aside space in her life for him even if she had to let go of everyone else to do it. But I didn't dwell. I didn't wait. Because I had finally stepped out of the roles I'd been cast in martyr-fixer background character in someone else's drama. I had written a new script, one in which my presence wasn't contingent on being needed or pitied or forgiven. I didn't wear the title of mother like a badge anymore. I wore it like a story I'd lived. Fully, honestly, messily. And now it was a story I'd closed-shelved with care and moved beyond. The quiet in my home was no longer emptiness. It was peace. And peace, I'd learned, doesn't come when others finally understand your worth. It comes when you stop needing them to. It's been 2 years. 2 years since I sat across from my children and told them for the first time in my life, no. 2 years since I chose silence over pleading distance, over longing and peace, over the endless ache of waiting to be seen. And in those 2 years, something extraordinary happened. Nothing and everything. I didn't go back. I didn't fold, didn't check in, didn't waver when birthdays and holidays came and went without a call. I let the silence stretch, not as punishment but as proof. Proof that I could exist beyond the role they had written for me. Proof that I was more than the woman they remembered only when they needed something. In that silence I found myself again. My days are full, though not in the way they once were. I wake up when I please. I spend hours walking trails that bloom with wildflowers each spring and burn golden in the fall. I volunteer at the local animal shelter twice a week. There's a cat named Daphne who won't let anyone touch her but me. I bake bread. I joined a small book club filled with sharp, witty women who laugh loudly and cry openly. We talk about literature and grief and what it means to start over after 60. I keep my phone on, but it rarely rings. And that's okay. Sometimes I look at the photo of baby Elijah that I tucked inside a drawer in my writing desk. I still haven't called. He would be 2 now, running, maybe talking. I wonder if he looks like Lillian when she was little. Chubby cheeks and impossibly wide eyes. I wonder if he likes to be held or if he pushes away like she did when she got older. But these aren't questions that ache. They are soft, passing curiosities like the breeze shifting through the open window. Here, then gone. There are moments, I'll admit, when I feel something stir. When I walk by an older woman at the park, holding hands with her grown daughter, or I hear a friend talk about their grandchildren visiting. There's a brief flutter of something. Not envy, not quite sorrow either. Just a reminder of what might have been if things had gone differently. If I had been treated differently. But I don't dwell. Because I know now that love, real love, cannot survive in a place where respect is absent. And I loved too long without being respected. People talk about motherhood as the ultimate sacrifice, and in many ways it is. But what they don't tell you is that the line between sacrifice and self-erasure is thin. And when you cross it, even with the best intentions, you teach others that your needs are negotiable, that your presence is permanent no matter how poorly you're treated. I taught my children that. For years I did. I was the always available mother, the fix-it-all mother, the forgive everything mother. I absorbed their anger, their indifference, their silence. I made excuses for them when they forgot, when they dismissed, when they hurt me. I called it love. But love without limits isn't noble. It's not devotion. It's not grace. It's servitude. And I will never go back to that. I used to think that being a good mother meant always saying yes. Yes to forgiveness. Yes to sacrifice. Yes to one more chance. But I've learned that sometimes being a good mother means saying no. No to being taken for granted. No to being used. No to continuing cycles of emotional neglect just because you're afraid of losing a seat at the table. I have my own table now. It's smaller, quieter. But every place at it is filled with sincerity, with mutual care, with people who see me, not just for what I can do but for who I am. I don't hate my children. I never will. That's the thing about being a mother. The love doesn't vanish. It changes. It becomes quieter, less consuming, more boundaried. I hope they're well. I hope they're raising Elijah with the kind of awareness I had to learn too late. I hope one day he'll grow up and wonder who his grandmother was. Maybe he'll find his way to me. Maybe he won't. Either way, I'll be okay. Because I didn't walk away to hurt them. I walked away to save myself. And I've learned more about love in these last 2 years than I did in decades of giving everything away. There's a different kind of joy in being invisible on your own terms. In no longer performing. In not having to twist yourself into palatable shapes to earn a seat in someone's life. In loving yourself so much that silence doesn't feel like exile. It feels like sanctuary. People ask me sometimes, mostly those who knew the old me, if I ever think about reconciling, about trying again, about forgiving. I smile. I have forgiven. I've forgiven myself for staying too long in a version of motherhood that cost me my identity. I've forgiven them for not knowing better. But reconciliation, that requires change. Not just words, not just invitations with strings attached. It requires action, accountability, public restoration for public harm. And until that comes, if it ever does, I'm at peace staying here. In this life, I built from the ashes of a role I was never meant to keep forever. I've become the mother my children deserved all along, not the one who bends until she breaks, but the one who teaches through consequence, not through hollow advice or tired cliches, but through truth. And truth, once you stop running from it, is the most powerful lesson of all. Have you ever loved someone so deeply, only to realize that love without respect slowly erases who you are? Natalie's story isn't just hers. It belongs to so many mothers who gave everything only to be cast aside when they were no longer needed. If you've ever felt unseen in your own family, if you've ever had to choose peace over presence, then maybe you understand her quiet strength. What would you have done in her place? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this speak to your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss the next powerful story of dignity, healing, and truth. Because sometimes the quietest goodbyes echo the loudest.